Hey guys, Mr. Gran here. This is 13.6, the law of cosines. So in this video, we will be solving triangles using the law of cosines. All right, so the first version of law of cosines is this. And this is specifically for finding a missing side. So we've got a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of a. It's very similar to the Pythagorean theorem. It actually comes from that, except now we've got this minus 2bc cosine of a that sort of makes up for the fact that it's not a right triangle. The idea here is that we know what the sides B, C are and the angle A. So we basically have an SAS triangle, a side angle side triangle. And we're using this to figure out what the opposite side A is. Now what's important in this is A and capital A are what matches. That if you are looking for the length of side A, that this is cosine of angle A, right? These two need to match. The B and C, you can switch the order around, not as important, but if this is A squared that you're looking for, this needs to be angle A. So if we were looking for B, side B, this would need to be angle B. If this was side C, then this would have to be angle C. All right, so looking at this, we are given side C, side A, and we're looking for side B to start with. We have the opposite angle B, so I've got that opposite side, and I'm going to use, or angle, and I'm going to use it to find the opposite side. So the first thing that I'm going to look for here is the length of side B. All right, so to do that, we're going to do b squared is equal to the other two sides squared, so 7 squared plus 5 squared, minus 2 times the other two sides, and cosine of our opposite angle, which is 100 degrees. And so for this one, I'm going to plug the whole thing into the calculator. So 7 squared plus 5 squared minus 2 times 7 times 5 cosine of our opposite angle, which is 100. And that gives us 86.16. So b squared is equal to 86.16. Now that's b squared, so in order to completely solve this to figure out what b is, I need to take the square root of both sides. All right, now in your calculator, if you want to do this, you can just do square root of 86.16, or you can do second and then the x squared button for to get the square root. And then if you go second and the negative button that's down in the bottom there next to the decimal, between the decimal and the enter button, it will input your previous answer. And then if you hit enter, it gives you the exact value, which will round to 2 decimal places, 9.28. All right, so we know that the side B is 9.28. Now we're solving the triangle, so we're gonna we'll get rid of this, and now we'll start figuring out the other angles. Okay, it doesn't really matter which one we do. I'm gonna start with angle A. Now, at this point, I can use the law of sines because I have the opposite side and the opposite angle. I know what those two things are. So this is going to be sine of 100 over 9.28 is equal to sine of A over its opposite side, 7, like we did in 13.5. Now if we cross multiply, one side is going to be 9.28 sine of A, and the other side is going to be, hopefully I can fit it in here, 7 sine of 100. Just barely got it in there. All right, now we're trying to get A all by itself. So the first thing I'm going to get rid of is that 9.28. So if I divide both sides by 9.28, I get that sine of A is equal to 7 sine 100 over 9.28. And then in order to find A, I'm going to do the inverse sign of all of that. So A is equal to inverse sine of 7 sine 100 over 9.28. All right, now pay attention to how this goes into the calculator because this is super important. All right, second cosine, no, not second cosine, second sine. And then it was 7 sine 100, end parenthesis, divided by 9.28, just like that. And we get 47.97 degrees. So angle A, 49.97. 49.97 degrees. All right, so I've got all three sides. I've got 2 out of my 3 angles. So the last thing I can do is figure out angle C. I just have to subtract from 180. 180 minus 100 minus 49.97, and that gives me 32.03 degrees. So 32.03, and our triangle is now solved. All right, one more example of that. In this case, we need to draw the triangle. So if we start out, just make any old generic triangle, however you want to do it. And this is triangle DEF. Angle E is 70 degrees. Side D is 4 and side F is 10. We're going to need to find side E. There's side D, there's side F. So we'll start out finding side E using the law of cosines. So that's going to be E squared is equal to the other 2 sides, so 4 squared plus 10 squared minus 2 times 4 times 10 times the cosine of 70. So let's plug that into the calculator. 4 squared plus 10 squared minus 2 times 4 times 10 cosine of 70, and we get 88.64. So E squared is equal to 88.64. And we are going to take the square root. And again, the shortcut, second x squared for the square root, and then second and the negative key to enter the previous answer. And now we've got 9.41. That is E. So I'll add that to my diagram. 9.41 is that side length. Now we have our opposite side and angle pair. We can use law of sines. Right, I can use these 2 to figure out one of the other 2. I'm going to do angle D. So that is going to be sine of 70 over 9.41. My opposite side angle pair is equal to sine of our angle D over 4. And we'll cross multiply. We get 9.41 sine of D is equal to 4 sine of 70. And again, we will divide both sides. We're trying to get to angle D. All right, so that means that sine of D is equal to 4 sine 70 over 9.41. And that means that the angle D is equal to inverse sine of 4 sine 70 over 9.41. So we'll plug that into the calculator. Second sine it was 4 sine 70 end parenthesis divided by 9.41.
Excuse the interruption, please. Sabrin Mohammed, please come to the
Classic.
main office. Sabrin Mohammed.
So
to the main
23.54.
office. Thank you.
23.54 degrees. All right, now that we've got that, get rid of this, and we can just subtract from 180. So if we have two angles, for angle F, we'll do 180 minus 70 minus 23.54, and that gives us 86.46 degrees. All right, so the second part of this, law of cosines for a missing angle, right? So the equation looks a little different. It's the same thing if we look back at the original equation that we went with. It's just that if we took this and we subtracted b squared and c squared from both sides and then divided both sides by negative 2bc, what we would have is this. So it's got the angle on one side and then all three sides on the other. So in this case, this is a scenario where we know what all three sides are, and we're trying to figure out what one of the angles is. So again, the important thing is the B and C can get switched around, but A and capital A and lowercase a have to be in those positions, or the matching letter combination needs to be in those positions. So if this was capital B, this is where lowercase b would be. If this is capital C, that's where lowercase c would be. All right, now, when it comes to using the law of cosines to find a missing angle, what we want to do is to start with the largest angle. All right, so we're going to start with the largest angle. Now, the way that this works, let's say that B, that is our largest angle. That means that side B has to be the longest side. The largest angle is opposite the longest side. And then if side A, if that's our shortest side, that means that angle A has to be the smallest angle. And then if C is like the middle side, the middle-sized angle, then side C has to be the middle lengthed side. Unlike law of sines, law of cosines can work for obtuse angles. So if we're starting with the law of cosines, you want to make sure that you find the largest angle first, because there can only be one obtuse angle in a triangle. And so if you start with the law of cosines for the largest angle, then it doesn't really matter what you use for the remaining angles. You could use law of cosine or sines. All right, so let's take a look at the first one. We're solving this triangle. We're given three sides. We're looking for all three angle measurements. The first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to locate the longest side, and I'm going to start by finding the largest angle. So cosine of C is equal to the other two sides, 10.5 squared plus 6.3 squared minus the opposite side, 12 squared, all over 2 times 10.5, the other two sides, 6.3. All right, so important thing, again, if we're finding angle C, this has to be the one which is side C. Okay, now when it comes to these, I like to plug these into the calculator in kind of steps. So if we go to the calculator, the first thing that I'm going to do is just the top of the fraction, and that was 10.5 squared plus 6.3 squared minus 12 squared. And that gives us 5.94. So the top of the fraction is 5.94. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom. 2 times 10.5 times 6.3, 132.3. This is a much better number to use in the calculator now than to try to do inverse cosine of all of this, because now I can do that c is equal to cosine inverse of 5.94 over 132.3. Much easier to do in the calculator than to try to do inverse cosine of all of this. So second cosine, and that was 5.94 divided by 132.3. And we get 87.43. Okay, now we'll move on to another angle. Now we've got the opposite side angle pair, so if you wanted to do law of sines at this point, you certainly could. I kind of think that law of cosines is a little easier to use, so I'm going to do this with law of cosine. So now I'm moving into finding angle A, right? It could be, you could do B, it doesn't really matter, I just do it alphabetically. So cosine of A is going to be equal to 12 squared plus 6.3 squared, the other two sides minus 10.5. So again, if this is A, this has to be side A, and it has to be squared, over 2 times 12 times 6.3. And again, I'm going to plug this in parts. So now we've got 12 squared plus 6.3 squared minus 10.5 squared. And then the bottom was 2 times 12 times, not divided by, times 6.3. And so those are the two values for my fractions, 73.44 and 151.2. So 73.44 and 151.2. That means that angle A is inverse cosine of 73.44 over 151.2. So inverse cosine, 73.44 divided by 151.2, and 60.94. So 60.94. All right, and now that I have two angles, all I have to do is subtract from 180 to find that last one. So angle B is 180 minus 87.43 minus 60.94, and that is which one am I looking at? There we go. 31.63 degrees. All right, last one, same idea, but now we got to draw the diagram. So we'll draw it out, D, E, F. D is 27, E is 33, and F is 14. All right, we're going to start out finding the largest angle, which here's my longest side, so E is the angle we will start with. That means that cosine of E is equal to 14 squared plus 27 squared. Again, the order of those two doesn't matter. What matters is that E, the opposite side, is where that minus 33 is. And that's over 2, 14, and 27. So go to the calculator. 14 squared plus 27 squared minus 33 squared. All right, we get negative 164. Now that happens sometimes. A lot of students get a little mixed up with that. They think they shouldn't get a negative number for one of these, but when we do inverse cosine, you can do inverse cosine with negative values, so it's no big deal. All right, and the bottom part was 2 times 14 times 27, 756. All right, so then E is going to equal inverse cosine of negative 164 over 756, and that is 102.53. All right, now let's do another one. Again, it doesn't matter. I could use the law of law of sines at this point. I could do either angle E or D or angle F. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to start with D. So cosine of D. That means that 27 is the important side. That's got to be the minus side. So 14 squared plus 33 squared minus 27 squared, all over 2 times 14 times 33. So 14 squared plus 33 squared minus 27 squared. And then the bottom is going to be 2 times 33 times 14, or 2 times 14 times 33. It doesn't really matter the order. 924. All right, so that means that angle D is inverse cosine of 556 over 924. And that is equal to 53.01. And if we get this far, then that last one, all we got to do is subtract from 180. Erase my 3. So angle F, it's going to be 180 minus 102.53 minus 53.01, and that gives us 22.46. And there you go. Now we got a solved triangle.